Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we are going to talk about conversational analysis and conversational discourse, right? Now, by conversation we mean the day-to-day conversation, you may say, conversation between two or more than two people. Like, we may have conversation in the class. When you go to the canteen, you have a conversation in canteen, right? If you look at your family conversations, uh, that they are also known, they are also considered as conversations. For example, if you are talking to your brother, your siblings, your parents, adult family members, young children in your family, right? You are actually having a conversation with them. That is too simple conversation, like the general conversation when we talk to people, when we have discussion with people, right? So that is simply conversation. Uh, Let me make Shamsul Haq. Okay. So how can we analyze conversation? If you look at conversation, in conversation we take turns and we allocate turns, right? For example, if two or more than two people are having a conversation in your class, for example, Safir, Tariq Shah, Mahar City, and Sabanur, if they are having a conversation regarding something, so they take turns and they allocate turns to one another. They take turns, right? Turn taking, this is something which we had talked about when you're in your first semester, if you remember. There was a very brief discussion on this, and I think before the midterm exam, also we have had a brief discussion on turn taking, right? Uh, so we take turns, we allocate turns. I'm coming to this topic in detail. Then the next point is adjacency pairs. For example, if I say Assalamu alaikum and you say Walaikum salam, so Assalamu alaikum, Walaikum salam, that is an adjacency pair. If I say thank you so much and you say you're welcome, that is an adjacency pair. A pair of two sentences, two utterances. So that is also part of conversation analysis. Then we have got preferred, dispreferred response, simultaneous speech when two people start speech at the same time, also known as overlapping, right? So we'll talk about simultaneous speech and error and repair, which is very much important. Sometimes we make conversational errors or speech errors. For example, a short while ago, if you remember, I said, Bilal, did you get me? And then I said, no, sorry, Fawad, I mean, did you get me? So that was actually a conversational error. Instead of Fawad, I mean, I said Bilal, right? So we make conversational errors. How do we correct those errors? What are the components of those, the error and repair technique, and what are the different strategies for correcting the errors, right? Conversational errors. So all these techniques are used for conversational analysis. But let's suppose if we're analyzing a conversation between two anchor persons or more anchor persons, right? Or if we're analyzing a conversation between a black and a white in some play, in some drama, in some movie, right? So we need to apply these techniques, these various theories or theoretical orientations of conversational analysis, right? So starting with the very first feature of conversational analysis, that is turn taking and turn allocation, right? I'll share the file with you. You may later on go through these points. I have collected these points from multiple sources. I'll share the references with you as well. And those sources, of course, I have already shared with you. I'll be briefly discussing, and then you may later on read these things from the file, which I'll share with you after this session. So let's talk about the definition of turn taking. First of all, turn taking is a type of organization and conversation and discourse where participants speak one at a time and alternating turns, right? The simple point is that if Safir, Tariq Shah, Mahar Seti, Sabanur, if they're having a conversation, so the conversation between them will go on very smoothly. Like it will not be the case that Tariq Shah will say something, for example, Assalamu alaikum, dear fellows, and then Tariq Shah will say, now I'm done with my turn, and now this is your turn, Safir. You may start speech, and Safir will say, Walaikum salam. Tariq Shah, how are you? and then Safir will say, Tariq Shah, I'm done with my turn, now you can start speech. Then Tariq Shah will say, I'm also fine. Ma'am Siti, how are you? And then Tariq Shah will say, I'm done with my turn, and now you may start speech, right? No, that will not be the case, right? Rather, our conversation goes on very smoothly. Tariq Shah will say, Assalamu alaikum. Safir will say, and the other says, well, wa alaikum salam. Then someone may say, how are you? Another person will say, I'm fine. The next person may say, do we have a class today? The next person may reply, yes, we do have a class, right? The next person may say something else, and other person may give some other reply. But this conversation will go on very smoothly, right? The speech participants or interlocutors, when they are engaged in a conversation, they give certain clues to one another, certain signals to one another, and with the help of those signals, they actually let one another know that now this is their turn, right? So that is what we call turn taking. We take turns. Like one person says something, and then another person says something relevant to that point, or maybe something irrelevant as well, right? But take turns. We take turns. One person speaks, then another person speaks, then the next person, then the next person, right? So this is what we call turn taking. In conversation, we take turns, right? Remember, there are cultural differences with regard to turn taking and turn allocation. There are some cultures where two or three people may speak at the same time. There are certain cultures where people have to wait for certain transition relevant points. Transition relevant point means like we're coming to talk about transition relevant point here, right? But transition relevant point means a point where it is allowed for you to take the turn. So if you look at the Pashtun culture, for example, so people take turns but they wait for the transition relevant point. Pakistani culture, there are some cultures where people do not wait for the transition relevant point, where they do not wait for their own turn, rather they start speech very abruptly, right? There are some cultures where people have to wait a lot, like there is a culture in Papua New Guinea, and I'm forgetting the exact name of that society and the language as well. But there is a language in which when you offer a cup of coffee to someone, or tea, or some drink to someone, for example, if Safir says, if Safir tells Tariq, would you like to have a cup of coffee? Then Safir will have to wait for 1 minute. And after 1 minute, Safir will say yes or no. And Tariq Shah will reply yes or no. Right? It means like they'll have to give a gap of 1 minute to one another. Right? So this is how cultural differences exist with regard to turn taking and turn allocation. You got it so far?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, there are two basic guiding principles for conversation. Two basic guiding principles, right? Guiding principle number one person should talk at a time, and we cannot have long silence. Like right now, I am having a conversation with you. The nature of this conversation is a bit different, because most of the time I'm talking and you people are listening to me continuously. It's not like the general conversation, the common conversation which takes place between people, right? But still, it is a conversation. Now, only one person talk at a time. One person should talk at a time, right? I'm talking right now. When I ask a question, did you get my point, or is it clear to everybody, or things like that? Then I take a pause, and you will start speech, right? One of you only one person. So the first guiding principle for a conversation is that only one person should talk at a time, and the next one is that we cannot have silence, right? Look at this online session. When there is a long silence, so you people sometimes say, sir, are you there? Or sometimes I say, are you people there? Right? So why? Because we cannot afford long silence in conversation. When two people are sitting close together, two or more people, and they're having a conversation, and one takes a pause. So the next person may say, yeah, you want to say something? Or if the next person does not ask that, at least he or she will say something, right? In order to break that pause and to overcome that silence, right? So now, please do not say that sometimes we, three or four people, we are sitting in the same room and we are busy in our smartphones. We do not talk at all, right? And there is a very long silence. I do not refer to that silence. That is something else. At that time, you're not having any conversation. When you are having a conversation, only one person will be talking at a time, and you will be speaking. There will be no long silence. If there is a long silence in front of one speaker, then another speaker automatically, starts speech, right? So these two guiding principles are there for a conversation. Remember, there are certain components for conversational analysis. For conversation, taking and allocation structure. There are certain components. The first one is transition relevant point, also abbreviated as TRP. TRP, transition relevant point, right? Look at this. Transition. Transition means a smooth movement, right? Relevant, appropriate, you may say, and point means point of time. Point of time, right? So transition relevant point means the point of time where the turn may end and a new speaker may begin, right? Or you may say that the place or the time in conversation where it becomes relevant or legitimate for another party to begin speaking. For example, I'm speaking right now, and out of nowhere, if someone else starts speech, that is not the transitional relevant point for him or her. Or if someone is speaking and I start speech in the same way, that is not the transitional relevant point for me to start speech, right? So transition relevant point means the relevant point, the appropriate point to take a transition, to take the turn, right? For example, if Safir and again, let me choose some other examples. If Bilal and Masroor Hayat are having a conversation, so if Bilal is talking, Bilal Alam, Masroor Hayat will have to look for a transition relevant point. Masroor Hayat will have to look for a short pause. If Bilal takes a short pause, right? Or if Bilal asks a question or some other signal which Bilal provides, only then that is the transitional relevant point for Masroor Hayat to take the turn, right? So transitional relevant point is one of the components of turn taking and turn allocation structures. Then we have got turn allocation. That is another component. The techniques which which we select the next speaker, like either the current speaker selects the next speaker, or the next speaker self-selects himself. We're going to talk about these rules in detail, right? This turn allocation in detail. Current speaker selects the next speaker, or the next speaker selects self-selects himself or herself. I'm coming to these rules right here, right? So these rules are, there are some rules which govern turn construction, the structure of turn taking and turn allocation. There are basically three rules, remember. How many rules are there? How many rules?
3 rules.
Three rules.
Okay. Rule number one is that Suleiman selected the students. I selected you people to take the turn. I said, how many rules are there? And you said 3 rules, right? It means I selected you people. I'm the current speaker. Like if you go back to 1 minute ago, right? 1 minute back, I was the current speaker. Current speaker, you may abbreviate it as CN. CS, current speaker. So I was the current speaker. I selected the next speaker. So the rule number one is that the current speaker selects the next speaker and transfers the turn to them. I selected you people, right? One speaker may select the next speaker. If, for example, Ilyas is having a conversation with Ibadullah, for example, right? And Ilyas asks a question or provides some signal, and selects Ibad or gives the turn to Ibad. So it means that the current speaker selects the next speaker, right? Next speaker. The current speaker selects the next speaker. Rule number two, if C does not select N, C means current speaker, you may say, if current speaker does not select the next speaker, then what happens? Then any other party may self-select. Any other party in case of a multi-party conversation. Let's suppose if Ibad, Masroor, Hayat, Fuad, Amin, and Mem Huda, Arusa, 4-5 people are having a conversation, and for example, Arusa is talking, right? And Arusa does not select the next speaker, and she keeps on speaking, right? What will happen? Another person may self-select himself or herself, like Fuad Amin or Sabanur or anyone else may take the turn, right? They may start speech, they may either interrupt Arusa, or that might be non-interruptive simultaneous speech, but still, that the next speaker will self-select himself or herself. So that is what we call the next speaker self-select, right? The current speaker selects the next speaker, or the next speaker self-select, right? So these two rules are there. Then there is rule number 3, when the current speaker selects the next speaker, but no one self-selects, or simply when the current speaker takes a pause. When the current speaker takes a pause and then no one self-selects himself or herself, then the current speaker continues until the next transition relevant point or until the end of conversation, right? I hope it's easy.
Sir, इसी number repeat
Yes, sir.
जी?
इसी number दोबारा repeat करें.
The last one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If there is a long silence, right? The current speaker takes a pause, or the current speaker ends his or her turn, right? And no other speaker selects himself or herself, and there is a long silence. What happens? The current speaker may continue the speech then, till the next transition relevant point or till the end of conversation.
Okay, sir. Now it is clear.
Now it's clear. Okay, good. I hope it's easy. Purpose of
Yes, sir.
taking. Okay. Now you said yes, sir, a bit later on, right? When I said I hope it's easy, and let's suppose if no one had replied, right? And if there has been a long pause, a long silence, definitely I'm the current speaker, so I would have to continue, right? So that is situation number 3, rule number 3. So concluding these 3 rules, rule number 1, the current speaker selects the next speaker. Number 2, if the current speaker does not select the next speaker may self-select himself or herself, because sometimes there are very long-winded speakers who keep on talking, who keep on speaking for a very long time, right? They do not take pause. They do not give opportunity to the next person, right? If they have to take a pause or to take a breath, they end their sentence with a rising intonation mostly, right? Or they end a sentence in between with such a point that it is not allowed for the next speaker to take the turn, and that person continues the speech for a long time. We have an example in the class, let me not name them, right? But in that case, what happens? The next speaker usually then self-selects himself or herself, right? So these are 3 rules. The current speaker selects the next speaker. The next speaker self-selects himself or herself. Rule number 3, if the current speaker talks and no one starts speech, the current speaker may continue the speech till the next transition relevant point or till the end of the conversation. You got it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
Now, what is the purpose of this turn taking and turn allocation? All these techniques simply to minimize gaps and overlaps. To minimize gaps and overlaps. As I told you that there are two guiding principles. Only one person should talk at a time. There should be no overlap or simultaneous speech. Right? Overlap when two speakers, when two people are talking at the same time, that is what we call simultaneous speech or overlapping. Right? And the second thing, we cannot have long silence, we cannot have long gaps. So the purpose of this this turn taking actually is to minimize gaps, to minimize long pauses, long silences, right, and to minimize overlaps. Simply to operationalize these two rules. Rule number one and rule number two principles, right? So that is actually the purpose of this turn taking and turn allocation. Now, when I talked about certain, if you remember, I told you that a speaker may give certain signals or certain cues, certain clues to the next speaker to start speech, right? So those cues may be, or those signals may be eye contact, gazes. I'm so sorry, you people cannot see me right now. Otherwise, I would have shown you with the help of my eyes that how can we, give a signal with the help of our eyes to the next speaker to start speech. When we say something and we move our eyes in a certain way to indicate to the next person that now it is their turn to start speech, right? So we may allocate the turn to another person through eye contact, or we may take the turn. Let's suppose if someone is speaking and we want to say something, so what do? We move our eyes in such a way that we indicate to the next person that we also want to say something, we have something to say and we want to take the turn, right? So eye contact is one of the cues of turn taking. Another is prosodic features. Prosodic features, like if you look at tone and intonation. For example, if I simply look at phone numbers. If you ask me to tell you my phone number and I say 0 You see 00. Let me focus on this cursor. 00 0 At the end, it comes downwards. It falls. That is the falling intonation, right? So the speaker will be listening until he or she hears that falling intonation. Falling intonation actually indicates the end of the sentence, right? A falling intonation may indicate, a rising intonation may indicate a yes/no question as well. Let's suppose if I say, "Was the paper easy?" Right? Was the paper easy? So this rising intonation actually indicates that that is a question, right? So prosodic features are very important for turn taking and turn allocation. Time, that is gap. Let's suppose if I say something and I take a pause. Let's suppose if I say this topic is a bit difficult, but I think it's interesting, and I take a pause, right? And in face-to-face conversation, what will happen? The next person will definitely say, or you people will say, if you people are sitting in front of me in a physical class, so you will say, "Yes, sir, it is easy," or "Yes, sir, it is interesting," right? So gap, time, that is another cue, another clue, another signal for turn taking, right? Sentence structure, if there is a question, so obviously an answer is expected, right? Let's suppose if I say, not any, okay, fine, I'll give you an example a bit later. Order. Let's suppose if I say, Mohsin Hassan, please mark the attendance. So Mohsin Hassan will say, "Yes, sir, I will do it," right? So when these different types of sentences, with the help of these sentences, we actually indicate to the next person, we give a signal to the next person that now it is their turn to start speech. Is there anything difficult so far?
No, sir.
No, sir.
That was actually an example. I asked a
Sir,
question and you took the turn. And now look at Tariq Shah, he is taking the turn. Right? Ji Tariq Shah, please.
yes, sir, it's easy.
It's easy. Okay, good. So, question: the sentence structure. Sentence structure is actually a clue, a kind of signal with the help of which we indicate to the next person that now we are done with our turn, and now it is their turn. But it is the transition relevant point. It is the relevant point. It is the appropriate time for them to take the turn, right? So these are certain clues used for turn taking in turn allocation. To conclude so far, turn taking in turn allocation, they're part of our day-to-day conversation, but there might be cultural differences. The structures of turn taking in turn allocation may vary from culture to culture, right? There are two basic guiding principles for the conversation. Only one person should talk at a time, and we cannot have long silence, right? Then there are certain components of conversational analysis, of turn taking in conversation, transition relevant points, then turn education, and then three rules. The current speaker selects the next speaker self-selects himself or herself. If the next speaker does not self-select, the current speaker may continue till the next transition relevant point or till the end of the conversation, right? And then certain clues or certain cues or certain signals, certain indicators for turn taking and turn allocation. In conversation, we have got adjacency pairs, right? If we focus on the terminology, adjacency is from adjacent. Adjacent means very close. When two things are, let's suppose if I say we'll have a class in the room adjacent to this room, right? Or in the room adjacent to my office. So adjacent to means very next to or very close to. That is what we mean by adjacent, right? Pair means a pair of two, group of two. When there are two things, we say a pair of socks, for example, a pair of socks, right? So adjacency pairs means a pair of two closely occurring utterances, or simply a pair of two close utterances. A pair of two close utterances. That is what we call adjacency pair, right? Adjacency pair, you may say, is a sequence of two related utterances by two different speakers. Two related utterances by two different speakers, right? Like if speaker A says Assalamu alaikum or hello, speaker B replies hi, right? Speaker A says how do you do, speaker B also says how do you do, right? Greetings simply Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam. Question answer. Let's suppose if I say is it easy and you say yes, question and answer, right? Complaint and denial, offer and acceptance, or offer and rejection. Would you like to have a cup of tea? Offer. Would you like to have a cup of tea? And you reply yes, sure, please. Or you may even reject, or you may say I'm so sorry, I'm just done with my dinner, right? Request may be granted, request may be rejected. Let's suppose if I say, sir, could you please allow me to ask a question, or sir, may I have a question, please? So I may the request may be accepted, right? Yes, please. Or it may be denied, it may be refused, right? Request may not necessarily be for a question, it may be for something else. For example, if I make a request, Mohsin, would you please bring me your register? Would you please bring me the register of your customer? So you may accept it. Sure, sir, I'll do it. Or you may refuse. You may simply say, I'm sorry, sir, I'm not at home these days, right? Compliment rejection or compliment acceptance. Let's suppose if someone says, sir, you're very lenient in marking and I say thank you so much, right? Or if you say you're very lenient in marking, I may say no, not this time, please, right? It depends upon your performance in the papers. I'm just kidding, right? So compliment and rejection, or compliment or acceptance, challenge or rejection, challenge or acceptance, right? Apology, acceptance. Let's suppose if someone says, I'm so sorry, the next person may accept it, it's okay. But not every apology deserves it's okay, right? So sometimes when people say, I'm sorry, the next person sometimes may say, it's not okay, right? So these are actually two utterances, a sequence of two related utterances uttered by two speakers, right? That is what we call an adjacency pair. An adjacency pair is composed of two tones produced by different speakers, which are placed adjacently and where the second utterance is identified is related to the first, right? Adjacency pair is composed of two tones. There must be two tones, remember. They must be produced by two different speakers, right? And those two utterances must be placed adjacently. Adjacently means those two utterances must be they must be placed close to each other in terms of time, right? And they must be relevant. They must be related. Like you may say that the second utterance is identified as related to the first one, right? So this is what we call an adjacency pair. Now, an adjacency pair typically has got three characteristics, which we have already talked about here. Let's further explicitly talk about them. The first characteristic is that there must be two utterances. They consist an adjacency pair. Adjacency pair consists of two utterances. Let's suppose if I say Assalamu alaikum and no one responds, so that is not an adjacency pair. That is not a pair, because a pair means two, right? So if there is one utterance, that is just an utterance, that is not a pair, right? So that can never be an adjacency pair, right? Then the utterances are adjacent. That is, the first immediately follows the second. Let's suppose if I say Assalamu alaikum and at the end of the class, Mohsin Islam says Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It will not make any sense, believe you me, right? So that is not an adjacency pair, right? Adjacency pairs, they are closely related to each other in terms of time. Sorry, the utterances of adjacency pair are closely related. In terms of time, they are adjacent. One immediately follows the other, right? And they must be uttered by two different speakers. They must be produced by different speakers. If I say Assalamu alaikum and then no one responds and I say Wa alaikum assalam, it's not an adjacency pair. Have you heard that joke related to this point? Are you people there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me tell you a joke regarding this. There was a person who used to steal some apples from a garden every night, right? What would he do when he would go to the garden? He would make a formal request, a polite request. He would say, if you don't mind, may I have some apples, please? And then he would respond to himself. He would say, yes, you may take as many as you want, right? और फिर उसकी मर्जी जितने एप्पल्स चाहता था तो बुरी भर के ले जाता था घर. मालिक को शक हो गया कि यार ये क्या माजरा है, दिन ब दिन एप्पल्स कम होते जा रहे हैं. तो एक दिन वो चुप गया एक दरख्त के पीछे. जो ही वो चोर आया, चोर ने अपने आप से इजाजत मांगी, मैं कुछ एप्पल्स लेके जा सकता हूँ. फिर जवाब दिया खुद को, जी जाए, लेके जाए, जितनी मर्जी लेके जाए. और बस जो उसने बोरी भर दी और कंधे पे रख के जाने वाला था तो मालिक ने पकड़ लिया गरीबान से. मालिक ने खुद अपने आप से सवाल पूछा, मैं कुछ लात मार सकता हूँ? फिर अपने आप को खुद ही जवाब दिया जी मारिए जितनी मर्जी मारिए और शुरू हो गया, राइट? So actually both of them produced those two utterances, and those utterances were produced by each of the same speaker, right? Like each of those speakers, like the thief, he produced those two utterances, and in the same way, in the order of the garden, he also produced those two utterances by himself. That is not what you call an adjacency pair. The two utterances of an adjacency pair must be uttered by two different speakers, right? So an adjacency pair has got two utterances. Those two utterances must be uttered by two different speakers, right? And those two utterances must be closely related to each other. Now, there are some insertion sequences. I have written examples for you people so that it may be easy for us to cover this topic within the same session. Insertion sequences, remember, not every first part receives a second part. Before this, keep this in mind: first pair part and second pair part. An adjacency pair has got two parts: the first pair part and the second pair part, right? For example, first pair part is uttered by speaker A and second pair part is uttered by speaker B, right? So that is what we call first pair part and second pair part, right? But remember, this first pair part does not always receive the second pair part, right? How? Look at this example. This is speaker A and speaker B, right? Speaker A and speaker B. Could you mail this letter for me? Speaker B would reply, okay. This is an adjacency pair. Okay is the response or the reply or the second pair part of this adjacency pair. It is actually a response to this question, right? But look at this now. Let me use different colors. This is an adjacency pair. The one highlighted as yellow, right? Now the one highlighted as green is actually an insertion sequence. Insertion sequence, look at this. Could you mail this letter for me? Instead of saying okay, speaker B may ask a question. Speaker B may initiate another adjacency pair. He or she may say, does it have a stamp on it? And speaker A then reply, he or she may reply, yeah. And then speaker B will say, okay. So this okay is actually an answer to this one, right? And this adjacency pair is called insertion sequence. You may simply say it is an adjacency pair within an adjacency pair. An insertion sequence is one adjacency pair within another adjacency pair. You got this?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, fine. Let's suppose if I'm speaker A, for example, right? And the teacher, here is the teacher, and here is, for example, the class representative, right? Here. The teacher says, please bring me a marker from the reception, right? The CR may simply say, okay, sir, right? But the CR may insert a sequence. The CR, instead of saying, okay, sir, the CR may simply say, sir, blue or black. And the teacher may reply, a black one, or simply black. right? Then the seer will say, okay, sir. Now look at the colors. Look at the colors. Focus on them. Highlighted as yellow is one adjacency pair, and in between highlighted as green is an insertion sequence, right? So this is what we call an insertion sequence, an adjacency pair within an adjacency pair. There might be many insertion sequences, right? I'll give you examples. Now, I'll give you examples later on. What are the purposes or the functions of these insertion sequences, right? We insert sequences due to several reasons. Number one, if speaker B does not understand, so that is a request for clarification. A request for clarification, right? For example, if speaker one, or if a teacher says, for example, in the coming class we'll be talking about in the coming class we'll be talking about error and repair and simultaneous speech, right? So students may reply, sure sir, right? But if the students don't understand what the teacher has recently said, so they may say, sir, what? Sir, could you please repeat it? Right? When you ask a question in the online session and the voice is not clear and I do not understand your point, right? So what do? I insert a sequence for clarification. For example, if you say, sir, do you have a class tomorrow? So that my answer should be, when you say, do we have a class tomorrow? My answer should be simply yes or no, right? But when I don't understand what you have said, I will say, instead of saying yes or no, I will say what? Or I'll say, could you please repeat it? Or can you please come again? Right? So then you will repeat that question and I'll say then yes or no. Right? So when we don't understand the point, when a speaker does not understand the point, so the speaker inserts a sequence for clarification. That is the first reason or the first purpose of insertion sequences. The second purpose of insertion sequence is that when a speaker does not want to commit himself or herself until he knows more, right? Let's suppose if I ask someone in the class, the topper of the class is, I think, Maham, right? If I say, Maham, would you please write an assignment for me, right? So Maham may simply say, sure sir, or she may say, she may come up with an apology, I'm sorry sir, I'm busy these days, or I'm not at home, I do not have my laptop, or things like that, right? Multiple excuses might be there. Anyways, look at this. She may come up with yes or with a no, right? But when she does not want to commit herself to doing my assignment until she knows more, right? क्योंकि कभी कभार कुछ काम करने से पहले हम जानना चाहते हैं that whether we are able to do that thing or not. Right, so we need to know more about the nature of that thing, right? So instead of saying yes sir or I'm so sorry sir, Maham may say, Maham is speaker B, right? So Maham may say, sir, is it PhD assignment or a BS level assignment, or a graduate level assignment, a BS level assignment, right? So I may reply, speaker A, I may say PhD level assignment, for example, right? Now she may if she does not want to commit herself until she knows more about the nature of this assignment, she may come up with another question. She may say, sir, what's the deadline? What's the deadline? What's the last date of the submission? I'll respond, you still have got 1 week, or the last date is 15th of the coming week, right? 15th of the coming week. Only then she may say, sure, sir, I'll do it. Or I'm so sorry, sir, I'm so busy these days. I have got my own assignments and my own exam. Now, see, this utterance of speaker B and utterance of speaker A, this is an adjacency pair, and these two are insertion sequences. Insertion sequence number 1 and insertion sequence number 2. You see? Rather, let me color it differently. So adjacency pair is the yellow one, right? Green is insertion sequence number 1, and then the green is blue is another insertion sequence number 2. Green is number 1. So when a speaker does not want to commit himself or herself before until he or she knows more, they keep on inserting sequences, right? The reason number 3, when someone is simply stalling, right? Stalling means like sometimes we need to think about doing something, right? And we need some time. That is what we call stalling, right? So let's suppose if you ask me, CR of the class, for example, if the CR asks me, sir, do we have a class tomorrow, right? And I or the teacher needs to have some time to think whether they have a class tomorrow or not, right? Or whether he is available tomorrow or not. So the teacher, instead of simply, the teacher will simply, like, the expected answer is yes, definitely we'll have a class tomorrow, or no, we don't have a class tomorrow, right? But in between, there might be insertion sequences. The teacher may say, what day it is, right? Or is it, for example, is it 30th tomorrow? Is it 30th tomorrow, right? The CR will reply, yes, right? Then, if the teacher needs some more time to think if he has got class tomorrow or not, or if he or she is available tomorrow or not, the teacher may insert some other sequence. The teacher may say, how many classes did we have in the previous class, right? The CR may reply, sir, we have had 3 classes, right? Or 4 classes. Then the teacher may say yes or no. So this, you see, this highlighted is yellow. This is basically the adjacency pair. Now, highlighted as green is insertion sequence number 1, and highlighted as blue is insertion sequence number 2. You got it now? This is due to these 3 reasons we insert sequences, right? Look at the example I have taken from the book written by Brent Poltridge. The CR, if the CR calls the librarian, for example, we have the study of language. Sorry, I have changed certain sentences in this example, right? In order to make it more understandable for you people. If the CR calls the librarian and says, do you have the study of language? That is question number 1, right? Its answer is the answer given by librarian, sorry, it's out. It's out means like it's not available in the library right now, right? This is actually the insertion, the adjacency pair. Now, if the librarian needs some time to check the book, to confirm if the book is available or not, right? So The librarian will say, the librarian may take a pause. The librarian may maintain silence, right? But since they are on telephone, right? The CR has called the librarian. So as I told you that we cannot have long silence, right? So in order to fill in that silence, to fill in that gap, the librarian will start inserting sequences. The insertion sequence number 1, by whom, though the librarian already knows that that book has been written by George Jules, right? But still, you know, or if the librarian does not understand that the study of language by whom has it been written, so the librarian may insert a sequence. He may say by whom, then that is question number 2. An answer of question number 2 may be provided by the CR by George Jules, right? Then the librarian may say, I'll have a look. That is a request to hold on, right? Then the CR will say thanks. And then the librarian may say, sorry, it's out, right? So, insertion sequences. Simply look at the story of Bani Israel. Have you ever heard this name before?
Yes, sir.
When Almighty, yeah, the story of the cow, right? They have got an entire surah in the Holy Quran, Surah Baqarah, the largest and the longest surah in the Holy Quran, right? When Almighty Allah ordered them to slaughter a cow, to slaughter a cow. Sorry, that was a bilingual slip of the tongue, right? Slaughter a cow, right? Instead of saying the Bani Israel, instead of saying labbaik, right? Sure, Almighty Allah, we are going to do it. They started inserting sequences because they wanted to know more about the nature of the cow. They wanted to, you know, they did not want to commit themselves to doing that action, to slaughtering of the cow. So they started inserting a lot of sequences. They said, they asked Hazrat Musa alayhi salam to ask Almighty Allah about the color of the cow, right? What should be its color? Almighty Allah replied, its color should be golden, right? What should be its age? Almighty Allah replied, this should be the age. They inserted so many sequences, right? And at the end, when they realized that they could not get rid of doing that thing, they performed that action. They slaughtered the cow at the end, right? But the basic point is that inserting sequences, slaughter a cow and labbaik. That was actually adjacency pair, and in between there were inserting sequences. Is it clear so far?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's talk about with this point, preferred and dispreferred response, right? I think then that much will be sufficient for today's session. We'll decide it later on after getting done with this very small point. Preferred, what do we mean by prefer? When we prefer something, when we like something. Dispreferred, when we dislike something. A response can be preferred on part of the speaker, right? Or it can be dispreferred response. If you have watched the Dawn movie by Shah Rukh Khan says, मुझे yes सुनने की आदत है, right? So हम सबको हाँ सुनने की आदत है. We like what we prefer. We prefer to hear a yes, right? Let's suppose if I say we'll have a class of 3 hours in the coming week. So मुझे भी yes सुनने की आदत है. वो I expect to hear a yes. In the same way, if you people say, sir, could you please allow us not to take a class in the coming week? So आप लोगों की भी हाँ सुनने की आदत है. You also like to hear a yes, right? So we prefer positive response and we disprefer negative responses. So a response which we like, which is a positive response, that is called preferred response, and a response which is a negative response, right, and which we do not like, that is what we call dispreferred response. So preferred response and dispreferred response. Now, there are certain characteristics of preferred responses and dispreferred responses. But before that, let me tell you, why are we talking about preferred responses and dispreferred responses? We're talking because these responses are actually part of these adjacency pairs, right? Let's suppose if I say, I'm so sorry, that is, for example, in apology, I'm so sorry. So the preferred response is, it's okay. It's okay, right? Or if I make an offer to you, would you please, would you like to join the party tonight, right? That is an offer. So the preferred response is yes, sure, I'll come to the party. That is the preferred response. And the dispreferred response is, I'm so sorry, I'm busy today, or I am having an exam tomorrow, so I won't be able to come to the party. That is a dispreferred response, right? अलग इकबाल ने भी कहा है ना कि इनकार की आदत को वो the housefly and the spider, right? That poem. इनकार की आदत को समझती हो बुरा में, सच्ची है कि दिल तोड़ना अच्छा नहीं होता, right? So that is the thing. Like we disprefer the negative responses. So they're part of these responses are actually a part of adjacency pair. That is why we are discussing them here. Preferred response, dispreferred response, characteristics of preferred response and dispreferred response. Preferred response is most of the time that is acceptance. That is, a preferred response is acceptance, right? Would you like to come to the party? So the answer is yes. So yes is actually acceptance, right? Dispreferred response is a rejection. No, I won't come to the party. I'm sorry, I cannot come to the party, right? So I'm sorry, I won't come to the party, or simply no, right? So dispreferred response and yes, sure, I'll definitely come to the party. That is preferred response. Preferred response is acceptance. Dispreferred response is rejection. Preferred response is short. Preferred response is short, right? While dispreferred response is long. Short, would you like to come to the party? The answer is yes, definitely, or simply yes, right? That is very short. Now dispreferred response is long. Long, why? Because it is marked by hesitation, it is marked by elaboration, it is marked by hedging. Let's talk about these three, then we will come back to the point that preferred response is short and dispreferred response is long. Hesitation. When we want to say no to someone, obviously we are hesitant because the person may get upset on us, right? The person may mind that, right? Because the person disprefers a negative. Everyone disprefers a negative response. So our response is marked by hesitation. Hesitation, like you know, these markers or thing like that. Hesitant. We are hesitant while saying no to someone, right? And usually there are long pauses when someone says, "Would you like to come to the party tonight?" So we take pauses. We say, "I'm," you know. Then we take a pause. Then we say something. Then we take a pause. So pauses are there. That is why it is long. Elaboration is there. Elaboration. Let's suppose if someone asks, if I ask someone, would you like to come to the party? So if that person wants to come up with a preferred response, with a positive response, with an acceptance, that person needs not to provide any elaboration. That person would simply say yes. But if that person wants to come up with a negative response, with a rejection, we usually tend to elaborate. We need to provide reasons, right, behind that rejection. We say, sir, you know, actually, I have got my cousin's marriage today, and since we have got a very close family relation with them, so I'm going there. I hope you won't mind it. Did you notice? A lot of elaboration is there. So this preferred response is elaborated in nature, right? Ketina urdu mein there is a very famous word. It reads, गुनहगार समझी कि दुनिया तुझे गुनहगार समझे कि दुनिया तुझे अब इतनी ज्यादा सफाई न दे. Now, when कभी कभार जब हम कोई गलती हो जाती है हमसे, तो अगर हम गलती की ना हो तो हम सफाई देना शुरू कर देते, लेकिन जब हम हद से ज्यादा सफाई देने लगते हैं तो इट मींस देयर इज समथिंग fishy, राइट? हमारी कोई गलती हमसे हो गई. दैट इज व्हाई वी समटाइम्स elaborate things too much, right? So elaborate when we want to come up with a negative response, when we want to refuse the offer or the apology or request of someone, we actually elaborate, right? Okay. Look at this. If someone says, I'm sorry, so if you want to accept the apology and the response is a positive preferred response, you say it's okay. But if you come up with a negative response, a rejection of the apology, you say, देखिए बात ऐसे नहीं है, आपने जो किया आपने इस तरह किया उस तरह किया उस तरह किया, so you start elaborating the things, right? Then the last one, hedging. When we want to come up with a negative response with a rejection, we use hedging. Such marker signals, we have already talked about hedging in language and gender and many other topics, if you remember, right? Hedging like, a sort of, kind of, well, I think, these are hedging, I guess, right? Hedges. Linguistic features or words which show uncertainty. Okay, so when we want to come up with a negative response, a dispreferred response, we use hedges. Like if someone asks us to come out to join his or her party, or to join his or her marriage ceremony, we say, and we want to come up with a rejection, we say, actually, well, it's a kind of, I have got a kind of busy routine, so kind of, well, I think, I guess, these are the various hedges we use. And an account of why the preferred response wasn't given. An account, we give the reason. I have got this and that activity, these things in my schedule, that is why I did not come to join your party or to join your marriage ceremony, right? So that is why I told you that this preferred response is long, while preferred response is usually short. It is without hesitation, and this preferred response is with hesitation. It is marked by hesitation. It is marked by elaboration. It is marked by hedging, right? Look at the example. Why don't you come to our party on Saturday? Then there is a pause, right? Well, I would like to, but it's my brother's birthday. That is a marked rejection. Marked rejection, right? Marked means marked by hesitation, marked by elaboration, right? Marked by hedging. Well is hedging. I would like to, but it's my brother's birthday, right? So this is, providing a reason, kind of hesitation is there, elaboration is there. So this is marked rejection. Now, there can be unmarked rejection as well. Unmarked rejection, for example, if someone says, would you like to come to the party tonight? And the answer is no. The answer is no. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sorry, I have recently changed my laptop. I don't know whether I'll have that movie with me on. Yeah, it is here. Has anyone watched this movie?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Is the voice audible to you? The voice of the movie?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No? Okay.
Munna by MBBS movie, sir.
Yes. Let me make this sound available to you, audible to you. ये किस तरह शेयर होगा, ये कंप्यूटर का जो वॉइस है? I don't know. चले
सर
फाइन। एनीवे
नीचे
जी
नीचे वॉइस में चेक कर ले, उसमें मीडिया का अलग होता है, डॉक्यूमेंट्स वगैरह का अलग होता है, नोटिफिकेशन का अलग होता है।
किसमें क्लिक कर लो?
नीचे
इधर
वॉइस पे जाइए ना, जहाँ पे
ये वाला। Are you talking about this?
सॉरी सर, ये सेटिंग कुछ चेंज लग रही है।
Oh yeah, it's a kind of different setting. Yeah. Anyways, what happens here when this person asks, use a phone for audio? No. When this person asks the dean, okay, no, I'm sorry, it cannot be done, right?
सर मुझे
By the
याद है,
way,
ये पूछता है क्या मैं पूछ सकता हूँ ये सब क्या हो रहा है, और वो बता रहा है नहीं।
exactly. Either when he comes here,
क्या मैं पूछ सकता हूँ ये सब क्या हो रहा है? नहीं।
did you hear it?
यस सर।
Yes, sir.
Okay, what happens? The dean asks, क्या मैं पूछ सकता हूँ या क्या हो रहा है? And he came up with an unmarked rejection. Unmarked, right? He simply said no. Unmarked means not marked with hesitation or elaboration or hedging. Now, this is called unmarked rejection. We have to mark rejections. Why do we mark rejections? Here are certain reasons, right? Let's suppose if someone invites us for a party, right, or for his or her marriage ceremony, the person asks for us, for example, would you like to come to the party tonight? And we want to come up with a dispreferred response, that is no, but we fail to mark it. If we fail to mark it and we simply say no, like speaker A asks, would you like to come to the party tonight? And we reply no, simply a no. That is, unmarked rejection. Unmarked rejection. What will happen? दूसरा बंदा जो है, he may take it and hurt, बुरा मान जाएगा ना, बुरा। सच ये है कि इनकार की आदत को समझती हो बुरा में, सच्ची है कि दिल तोड़ना अच्छा नहीं होता. So it will sound strange, it will sound very odd, very rude when we unmark a dispreferred response. When we unmark or when we come up with an unmarked rejection, that is what sounds very odd, very strange, or we may sound very rude at a time, right? So that is why we need to come up with, first of all, we need to come up with a preferred response. But if we want to come up with a dispreferred response, that response must be marked by hesitation, elaboration, or by hedging, right? And an account of why the preferred response wasn't given. Now, coming to a very basic and very important question, the subject is critical discourse analysis. Now, why are we discussing these time taking, time allocation techniques and critical discourse analysis? Why are we talking about adjacency pairs, insertion sequences? Why are we talking about these preferred and dispreferred response in CDA, right? You already know that CDA is all about power relations. It's all about our relations. We have talked about it so much. Our relations, right? Who is dominant, and who is subordinate? That is what we talk about in critical discourse analysis, and that is what we analyze, right? So let's suppose if you are analyzing a conversation where there are some, sorry for the typos, some dominant speech participants on one hand and some subordinate speech participants on the other hand, right? You're analyzing a conversation simply, and you want to explore that who is dominant and who is subordinate in this conversation, or how has the author portrayed them as the dominant and as the subordinate. Let's suppose if there is speaker A and there is speaker B. For example, speaker A is inserting sequence as speaker A is taking turns again and again. Speaker A is taking turns continuously. Speaker A is, sometimes a speaker A may continue his or her speech for a long time. When speaker A wants to give turn to another person, only then the next person, speaker B, may start speech. Otherwise, speaker B will remain silent for a long time, and speaker A will keep on speaking. Speaker A will keep on talking. Speaker A can self-select himself or herself repeatedly, while speaker B is not self-selecting himself or herself. If speaker A is talking, speaker B remains silent, right? When speaker A selects speaker B, only then speaker B starts speech, and when speaker B is talking, speaker A may self-select himself or herself easily. It means speaker A is dominant. Speaker A is dominant because he or she is selecting speaker B, right? Speaker B cannot self-select himself or herself. It means speaker B is subordinate in conversation, right? So that is turn taking, turn allocation. If you look at adjacency pairs, so let's suppose if speaker A gives a command to speaker B. For example, if speaker A says, bring me the register, right? Speaker B will definitely say, sure, sir, right? Or sure, definitely, okay. But if speaker B gives a command to speaker A, and speaker B, instead of giving a straightforward answer, instead of providing the second pair part, if speaker A comes up, or if speaker A inserts a sequence, which register, right? If speaker A keeps on inserting sequences all the time in conversation, again, it means the speaker A is dominant and speaker B is subordinate, right? Coming to preferred and dispreferred responses, if speaker A most of the times is providing dispreferred responses and speaker B is providing preferred responses. For example, if speaker A says, give me the pen, and speaker B says, sure, sir, take it, right? Preferred response. Now, if speaker B asks speaker A, give me the pen, please give me the pen, and speaker A says, wait a while, that is a dispreferred response, right? So if repeatedly, if there is a long conversation, we analyze the conversation, we come to know that speaker A is repeatedly using dispreferred response and speaker A is using preferred responses all the time. One more thing, if we come to know that if speaker A wants to give a dispreferred response, that dispreferred response is unmarked. That is unmarked rejection. Like speaker A sometimes uses unmarked rejection, simply no, right? Or wait, or things like that. But when speaker B wants to come up with a dispreferred response, the responses, the dispreferred responses of speaker B are all the time marked by hesitation and marked by elaboration, right? And hedging. It means that B is again subordinate and speaker A is dominant, right? So while analyzing a speech, while analyzing a conversation from critical discourse perspective, what we need to do, we need to focus on the turn taking and turn allocation structure. We need to focus on adjacency pairs. We need to focus on preferred and dispreferred responses. If we focus on all these features, and with the help of all these features, we analyze the conversation between two or more people, we can easily come to know that who is dominant in this conversation and who is subordinate in this conversation, right? In the next class, we will talk about simultaneous speech or overlapping, where we have got cooperative or non-competitive, non-interruptive simultaneous speech, and competitive, interruptive, or non-cooperative simultaneous speech, right? We'll talk about them in detail. We'll talk about turn taking and error and repair, the different techniques such as self-initiated self-repair, self-initiated other repair, other-initiated self-repair, and other-initiated other repair. We'll talk about all these strategies. So when we apply all these strategies in a on a conversation while analyzing it, we may easily come to know that who is dominant and who is subordinate. And that is the basic aim of critical discourse analysis, to find out, to explore power relations in text. That's all. Coming to the question and answer session.